Good morning, how are we? It's nice to see everybody. As Brian said, we've been around for 8 years now, but it's taken me that long to pluck up the courage to actually stand up here. So you'll have to excuse me, I'm going to read from my notes, and there's a presentation, so you can stay distracted and look up here and rather than at me. So, and like Brian said, with nothing behind here, you're going to see my knees knocking as well. The reason for starting OvaCare with June is that my mother would have passed away from ovarian cancer 20 years ago when I was in my 20s. And even though my mum was Irish, she moved to the UK in her 20s with a lot of my Irish family to find work over there. So that's why I'm English, but my family is Irish. So when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer at 49, we linked in with the UK charity Overcome, who are here today and talking later. And they were a massive support to my mum and our family. So when I moved to Ireland around 10 years ago, I was still doing fundraising for Overcome, and because I couldn't find the Irish equivalent charity here. So I advertised for support on the radio. I think I was doing something, I think it was the New York Marathon at the time, and June then contacted me saying, oh, there's an Irish charity. And I said, no. So we then met and kind of realised we needed to do something, so then kind of the rest is history, really. And then we get to work with other great charities like the Imakasi Foundation and SOC. So they, between all of us, we represent support, research and awareness just to cover, so we work very closely together. And the other piece was, I always said I wouldn't stand up here to tell my story for two reasons. One, I thought I'd get too upset talking about my mum, and that won't be any help to anybody. And secondly, I always felt a bit of a fraud, having not had cancer myself. I just thought, well, I'm not going to be any good to be talking up here. So a few things changed. What changed my mind is that today we have a genetic speaker, Terry. So my journey in the last 12 months is connected to that. So I thought now might actually be a useful time for me to stand up here. So I always said I wouldn't get genetically tested unless I was prepared to take action as a result of that, because I knew personally I wouldn't be able to just live with the information knowing I had the BRCA mutation. So, and I'm going to leave Terry to talk about the science behind that piece and percentages of risk and everything. But as far as I knew in my family, it was only my mum that had ovarian cancer, and my aunt previously had had breast cancer in her 40s, but she'd survived that and passed away 35 years later from a completely different cancer. So two things changed. So my aunt's daughter, Helen, got breast cancer when she turned 50 2 years ago, which thankfully got picked up as part of a genetic screening program in the UK. So this now brought breast cancer into my generation. And then the second thing was I then had a pain in my left breast, which now needed a mammogram for that. So I had an excellent breast consultant in Galway, and he asked about my family history. So I drew out this for him, and based on that family history, he said there's a 50-50 chance you could have the BRCA mutation, which I was quite shocked about. I didn't realise the percentage would be that high. So I spoke to my family who were part of that genetic screening program back home, and now I had further information. My aunt had the foresight to leave behind her blood sample, so we tested that, and so we found that she had the BRCA1 mutation, and then my cousin Helen, who had breast cancer, got tested as well, and she also has the BRCA1 mutation. So now, for me, there were too many screaming factors to ignore. So there was a 50-50 chance of having the gene, BRCA1 mutation was in my family, and I was in my 40s, which seemed to be the pattern that my family were getting these cancers. So, and I also found it strange that I had the pain in my left breast. It only appeared once, it immediately went away, and it never came back again. So that's kind of why I felt like I had whispers from heaven. So I felt like my aunt and my mum had put me on this path. So it came back no surprise to me that I had the BRCA mutation when I got tested. And I would say at this point that I was fortunate enough to be able to get tested privately because there was over a year's waiting list, and I felt like I didn't want to be hanging around really. And even though I knew the testing was rigid in Ireland, I think with all the cervical cancer scares, I also felt like I needed to send it somewhere else. So I sent a saliva sample to a US lab just to be sure that it came back positive, because before I was going to do all those drastic surgeries, it just made me feel better to know I checked it twice really. So now I felt like a ticking bomb, and I was dreading the MRI as I went back and forth working out surgery options. So it confirmed to me that I was right not to, I would have struggled not having the information. So my sister kindly reminded me that I would have had this mutation since I was born. So she was like, take the pressure off and just do what you're going to do. So I thought, what's another few months really? And I then thought, I'll leave the mastectomy options to one side, and I focused on the oophorectomies first. So removed the ovaries and tubes. As we know, you can't effectively screen for ovarian cancer, so I felt I needed to do that first. So I had the oophorectomy in September 2018, and from a physical point of view, recovery was fairly quick. And I'm in awe of women that have to face treatment before or after surgery. You know, I only had to deal with the surgical after effects and kind of coming to terms with not being able to have any more children. But I think for me, the hardest part, is why I called it the M word, was that no one really talks about kind of the menopause, and especially if it's surgically induced, because it's literally overnight. And I have to say, I kind of found the fog and anxiety that descends utterly debilitating for the following months. So kind of crying without even know or realising I was crying, and I just kind of think more can be done around that, of support and counselling after surgeries on so many different levels. So I've always been a fan of the holistic approach of medicine and therapies working hand in hand on your mind and body. So luckily I was now able to surround myself with the right support team, and I felt like I really needed that. I wasn't able to go on HRT until I completed the mastectomy. So in order to be able to think clearly enough to even make a decision on the type of mastectomy surgeries, I needed to, albeit reluctantly, go on a light antidepressant to alleviate the menopause symptoms that I had. And then I could go on HRT after. So following the oophorectomy, I then booked in for the mastectomy in March this year. And with so many different types of options for that surgery, I found it very overwhelming. So the breast surgeon completes the mastectomy, and then the plastics team move in to do the reconstruction during the same surgery. So I then found these two amazing books. And the one on the left it enabled me to kind of have conversations with surgeons about the type of surgery. And you can see it's well used with all the post-its. And then the other book was an autobiography of someone that was living with the BRCA gene, and just kind of their journey, and they're on Twitter, they're the BRCA responder. So I kind of found those two sources very helpful. And there's a lot of variations with the type of reconstruction you can have. And again, I was thinking of all the women that have a cancer diagnosis and they have to make some of those decisions at that time. I'm just amazed at how they kind of can get through that. So for me, there's fundamentally three options when you're having reconstruction. There's either do nothing and just have the mastectomy, or you can have implants or take fat from somewhere else in your body to replace the breast tissue. So all very personal choices. And implants weren't for me because I just didn't like the idea of a man-made substance in my body. So I went for what was called a DIEP surgery, which takes fat from your tummy. And that made it now a 10-hour microsurgery instead of a 4-hour straight to implant surgery. So to find the small positive, I was like, well, this is like a tummy tuck of sorts. And my husband was like saying, well, with the amount of cake you're eating before the surgery, you'll have enough for boobs on the front and the back. So I'm glad to say I'm out the other side of that surgery and had further fat grafting surgery 6 weeks ago. So despite the cakes, I didn't have quite enough fat. But all that seems doable compared to the previous surgery. So I need one more next year. But I also took photos of following the surgeries to kind of document the healing, so I'd be happy to share those with anyone about to go through the same thing. And my motivation that's kind of helped me do all these preventative surgeries is, of course, my family. I wanted to feel like I'd done my best to kind of be around for as long as possible for them. And my husband wouldn't let me put a photo of him up, so it's just myself and Maya. And I guess for Maya, obviously I have a worry for her too, but I'm hoping in kind of 20 to 30 years that science will have come a long way by then. Thanks for listening.